In July. So we've got 6 weeks. So, once a month, I run South Technical discussion groups at Vanessa, entire community. We come in, wants to come in and talk about testing. So, 45 minutes on the meeting, around lunch. You guys are more than welcome to come. It's not on the meetup. They're announcing on meetup about a week ahead. But it's also the same week ahead. Oh.
Kirby signed up, but he's only bringing me one.
But not number where.
Rob signed up and said he could bring somebody.
That's me.
Yes.
Okay. Then probably a wash through the rest of the season, back into the fall. Really big, that is it right now. Definitely do want to logger on it.
You would ask people if they want next.
Yeah. Just being this long vacation going on here. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's swinging out right here. And then I'm away the second Tuesday.
Questions how.
North American already happened. This is we ran one last year. This is sort of a North American test top. And we signed on as a sponsor for the year worldwide. Software testing competition. You don't know what's going to be tested until after the competition. You should go to the ask questions. Project, it's a testing. I think 3-hour thing, testing, right, final testing report, and submit it. And we lose like every half hour. It's like, you're only marked at 100. So you lose a lot of points really quickly by not paying attention to reporting on time. Nope. The top teams in each region go to worlds. The worlds this year are in Germany. All specifications for world games.
We may have to finish that battle later. No, I mean, yes.
Yeah, for sure. Almost all the other regions, Oceania just did theirs. I think they had 30 teams. North America had 60 teams. Asia, we cut off at 250 teams. Europe, we cut off at 250 teams. Africa is sitting at 100 some odd teams. Yeah. China, India, Malaysia. I guess all those places were getting
Yeah.
48 hours.
This is an assessment competition. Program competition, this is testing. You can actually get some really amazing forms from India.
They used to find that.
Well, that's not bad.
Yeah. You go, you should get.
Just scarfed out another piece of pizza.
You could actually get warm version.
Well, guy caught me off guard today. He was like 10 minutes early instead of 10 minutes late.
Where pizza sizes have changed over the years. Is those small boxes or that the
Okay. I guess we'll get started just a titch early today. Testing with times and time zones. Here, just a second. Let me reboot. I got to remember to do the intro so that when I edit this later, it makes sense. Thank you all for coming out to the May gathering of the Saskatoon Testing Discussion Group. Our topic for this month is testing with times and time zones. This can be one of those areas where testing is made more difficult because testing, especially with things like special dates, things that happen on the first day of the year, the first day of the month, the last day of the month, testing those can be quite difficult because if the code's not written correctly, you can only test it on that day, which makes life more difficult. Suppose on a standalone system, that's not that hard because you just change the clock on your standalone system. But of course, when you're dealing with web software, excuse me, I seem to have the burps today. Testing web software, this becomes a lot more complicated because you don't have any access to the clock that things are happening on. So I thought we'd do this week as a mind map. I did publish the mind map for last month. It went up on the Google Plus page and on the Meetup page. So I thought we'd start just with a discussion about the things that make testing times and time zones harder, or some of the gotchas that we've run into. And I'm actually going to split them into web/online software versus desktop software. Because the strategies for dealing with these two things, between these two topics, can be quite... Go over there. It could. It's not really what I meant by that division. Maybe by desktop software, I'm actually talking about installed software. Does that division make more sense? So software that you simply use over the network versus software that you can actually install on your machine, and it's grabbing its times and time zones from your machine. I think the strategy for these two classes of software for testing times and time zones is different enough that it warrants talking about them slightly separately. So, what are some of the things people in this room have run into related to times and/or time zones?
Expiry dates.
Expiry dates, testing when things expire. And you're going to make me create a third column because installed software has that exact same problem. And my typing always has the exact same problem. It can't spell. So yeah, testing expiry dates. When you're testing things that have one-year contracts, or so in installed software, you buy a one-year license. You install the one-year license. Well, how do you test to make sure that it's going to stop functioning in a year?
8 pages.
Yeah. And so much for my idea that these are going to be lots of separates. Date ranges for billing. What's something specific about date ranges for billing that makes this more complicated?
We bill, create this monthly. So where is the end of the month and where is the start of the month?
Also, date format. US, UK.
Oh, yeah.
The bill. Another one would be
Oh, time skew, yeah. I'm going to go over to web online software for that one because that's mostly an issue in online things. Sorry, Emily? Oh, display. Oh, okay, yeah. We'll go back over to general for that one. What happened? Sorry. Displayed format versus stored format. This is mostly an issue when you're dealing with time zones. We're all smart people. We all know that we shouldn't store things in local time because local time has things like daylight savings time that screw things up. So we should all try to store everything in UTC. But then users probably don't want to see UTC because if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they don't want to be told that they made an update at 8 p.m. because they know darn well they made the update at 2 p.m.
Another format is like the units time.
Yeah.
Time since.
Timestamp versus readable. Very few people can look at the number of seconds since epoch and actually know what time it is. Yeah, time resolution. Yeah, especially when you've got different systems interacting and sharing times. That's where this one tends to rear its head the most. One system is storing things in milliseconds, and one system is storing things in microseconds. They both look like big old numbers, so you don't notice that they're an order of magnitude off until somebody's bill isn't due until 50 years in the future. Pardon?
You're fighting over data as a robot first because the data steps.
Yeah. That's actually a really, I'm going to state that slightly different. I'm going to call this sorting. I'm going to, there we go. Missing information like year. A common bug that I've seen when people are displaying time information, especially in a graphical format, they've tried to make it more readable by simply saying what month it is or what week it was, so like April 2nd, April 7th, etc. These look really great because the library knows how to sort it. Then you hit January 1st, and all of a sudden January 1st is at the end of the graph, and December is back at the beginning of the graph, and it's completely out of order, because you end up with January coming before December. So it says January 1st, January 2nd, December 28th, December 29th, and slowly it corrects itself. It's a bug that only happens for 1 week, or 1 month, or whatever the window you have open where you actually have those dates from separate years, and the graph doesn't know that they're from separate years, so it's sorting January before December. I've seen that one quite commonly. Did I say like? I meant year.
I think in salt software, there's often a lot of assumptions made about the reliability of the local time. You see this all the time in software that has trial periods, where you can just keep resetting your time your local time, and the software will never expire. The trial will never expire because it's based off of that unreliable time.
Yeah, reliability of the local clock can definitely be an issue for installed software. Leap years. What does your billing system do when there's a 29th of February? Yeah. Leap years, specifically with calendar math. Yeah. You guys must deal with dates a lot. So what do you run in? What are some of the big things you guys run into? Pizza? Yes, pizza is commonly an issue.
Not that big of an issue, but I think we
Okay.
we're gonna get it down.
Yeah.
Outrageous development of our people go in that process too. Not just put it, paper-based stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess that's other stuff.
So.
We didn't do like a lot of big letters, that they should be.
Mm-hmm. So, back dating. So the ability to backdate functionality is actually an important feature. So it's got to. So that's going to complicate testing, because your entity might have a created date, but it needs to have an effective date as well, because you want to know for audit purposes when the entity was actually created, not just when we say it was created.
There's also another problem we have is we have a one process at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
It takes more than the day to run. So
Mm.
you take the whole system, you can make a copy of it.
Yeah.
And that they usually
Yeah, long-running processes that depend on dates and times, another common one. Emily's run into a different variant on that, where she has a process that runs every 5 minutes, but it takes more than 5 minutes to run, so it never finishes, because more ends up in the, it takes 5 minutes to run, the next one takes 5.5 minutes to run, the next one starts before that one finishes, and we end up eating the same data. That's more of a, not often so much a classified as a time problem, but as a processing time problem.
So something that's a snapshot of during the team.
Yeah. I think that's what you were referring to, is you need to do processing for what the system looked like at exactly 12:01 Eastern Standard Time, and at 12:02 Eastern Standard Time somebody has an account. Do you bill for them? Do you not bill for them? Yeah.
Accounts receivable, that's your net. Somebody's taking bill afterwards, it changes from your net.
Yeah, billing what to do when items are too new. So like most of our topics that sound innocent, we can always find complicating factors, things that make them more difficult. I think this one is probably my most favorite one to have to deal with. I see it the most commonly across the largest number of types of software. And certainly copying is one issue. But how long does it take to make a copy?
This takes about a week to do that process.
A week to not do the processing.
To get a copy of it.
Yeah.
On another server, and run it, and then isolate it.
Yeah.
Let the process. It's a week-long process.
Yeah. So testing that process, it has to be next to impossible to do because, and I bet even with the solution that you have described, you still get the occasional leaker that gets in there, somebody that is after your deadline but got in there before the copying process got to that record, so now you've got the occasional leaker into there.
Rob's got adjustments to do all the time. So.
Yeah. So yeah. So why don't we time skew? Web online time skew is a big issue. Let me click on this guy. Very much the one that I had over in general of display format is often common in the web online software. Billing is a bigger issue in web online as well, especially if you're billing for something monthly. When does the month start? When does it end? Well, the months start and end over a 2-day period. There's 47 hours that it takes from month change from one to the next, which is a bit of a pain in the butt because you have to pick some place to bill. Figuring that out. And wherever you draw the line, there's likely to be a customer who said, but I created that account on the first day of the month, not the last day. Why are you billing me for it? Because you created it in the wrong time zone. So yeah. And time zones is really sort of one of the biggest things you have to worry about in your web online software. Because as I said, if a customer is doing something on their local machine, they want any times that show up on their screen to show up in their local time. They don't want to have to sit there and do the mental math of, well, I'm in New York, but the guy I bought this software from is in Saskatoon, and it's spring, and they don't do daylight savings time, so they're 1 hour off. Okay, so yes, I need to schedule this post to go out at 1 p.m. when I want it to go out at noon. So time zones. And really the solution to this, although you have to test it extensively, is localization and UTC. And I spelled localization really badly. Oh well. So I'm sure there's other issues with. I haven't worked with installed software for a couple of years, but I recall there being other issues with testing with time and time zones on installed software, other than the reliability of the local clock.
There is one with the Windows regional settings. If you just display daytime box.net, it'll use whatever the local one has.
Yeah.
So every machine, if they're different, will have different daytime formats. It's probably what the user picked, but if they didn't install a system, they have no idea, and it's different. Or if they go to different machines, you're going to get different daytime formats.
I think that is web software too, actually.
Yeah.
US.
Especially with the new HTML5 widgets are becoming a lot more sensitive to things like the system's time zone, so that they can display things correctly, or the locale for the locale that the page is being asked for it.
I would see the fight with calendar schedule. Especially near Boston time zone, makes lots of.
Okay. Yeah, scheduling and booking across time zones can be very difficult. Meetup, in fact, has a bug that is in remission right now because it's daylight savings time. All winter, when it sent out emails for the meetups, it said they were at 11:15 a.m. But if you went to the website, it said 12:15 a.m. 12:15 p.m. They have a bug in their email that ignores the daylight savings setting, and so in winter it gets all of my emails wrong. Really frustrating. they don't seem to think it's important enough to fix for Saskatchewan and Arizona.
Is there condition to notebook settings and browser settings?
Less common. I don't know of many browsers that keep track of their time zone directly. They would normally just ask the system that they're running on for that information. Most modern systems keep track of their time zone so that they can use UTC for their system clock.
That's what I was thinking, sometimes like you cross the others.
Yeah, I'm just thinking proxying might have an effect. Definitely for web software, proxying would have an effect, especially if the server is taking a look at the geolocation from the receiver to do the time zone translations for them without explicitly asking the user to set a time zone. I can't say I've seen that one super a lot, but I have seen it. Most commonly in that situation, those companies will offer a user setting that you can override the time zone if it's getting it wrong, but they have to guess somehow. And they will either use wherever their servers are as their default, or occasionally they'll do some sort of geo IP guessing or infer from the timestamp on the TCP envelope. So time skew, time zones.
You also have your latency in your web connection that you're trying to help highly resolution.
Local server latency latency c. I can correct that one later. I know that one's spelled wrong as well. Yeah, no, definitely. Local server latency. Anytime you get into any sort of data sharing, even between closely coupled servers, it's no secret. We run lots of, here at Vendasta, we run lots of little systems to do small tasks, and they communicate a lot. So we have to timestamp all of that. We were doing milliseconds, and we were getting messages out of order. So we're now using microseconds so that we can keep our messages in the right order. Yes, race conditions on the millisecond order. Lots of fun. That's what happens when you have 800 machines all working on the same related tasks.
It's also eventually consistency as well.
Yes. Eventual consistency is a topic all of its own. I'm not even going to put it up there. That wasn't code. Eventual consistency is a problem that you run into when you're running distributed databases. There's two types of distributed databases. There's strongly consistent databases and eventually consistent databases. Strongly consistent databases will lock a record anytime it gets edited across all systems until the data is consistent. It's nice because you can ask the same question of any system and they'll all give you the same answer. It sucks because it's slow. If you're doing a lot of independent write operations, it's not that bad. But if you're doing a lot of independent and interdependent read operations, all that locking slows everything down to a crawl. So you go to weekly dependent or eventually consistent systems and acknowledge the fact that if somebody's changed his record in the past couple minutes, you might not get the right answer right away, but if you ask again in a little bit, it'll be the right answer. It'll be a right-ish answer. And for us, that's not a big issue. If we tell you that you have 7 reviews for your business and you actually have 8, because we found one, we've written it to the database, but we haven't, all the systems haven't replicated that yet, not a big issue. But too many systems all writing to the same record, you can get into some strange timing issues, which is what Dale was referencing. So this is lots of issues. How about solutions? How are we going to deal with these complications for testing times and time zones? Testing expiry dates. Well, hopefully, the programmers have made it possible for you to set a shorter expiry date. It's supposed to be a 1-year period. Well, maybe, sure, it's a 1-year period, but am I allowed to backdate it 362 days so that it'll expire in 3 days? Can I make it shorter than a year? So if I have to deal with expiry dates, does the system allow me to pick my expiry date, or is it constantly going to pick it for me? It's always going to be 365 days from now. Well, that's not very testable. So from a tester's point of view, when you get something that has an expiry date, the first thing we want to check is, can I change that expiry date to something that is testable rather than the system default? System defaults are great, but I need to be able to override them so I can actually test to make sure that whatever is supposed to be expiring actually happens.
Sure, that's another issue is that if you don't have a timestamp, you just have a date, something expires on a date. Is it at the beginning of the day or the end of the day before the day happens?
Mm-hmm. Beginning of the day, in which time zone? Are we all living in Hawaii and everything expires the last possible moment of the last possible day? Are we all in that really funky time zone that's actually UTC minus 25? There's a UTC minus 25 and a UTC minus 26. Yeah, they really exist. It's weird. I had to look them up the other day to prove somebody wrong. It's a chain of islands in the South Pacific, and they do all their commerce with the rest of the islands, but they're far enough across the date line that they need the other time zone, but being on a separate day would suck. So yeah, literally, it's a UTC minus 25, and then it goes into daylight savings time, and it becomes UTC minus 26. It's weird. It's one of those strange corner cases that I hope I'll never actually have to explicitly test. But it exists. So yeah, that segues greatly into date ranges for billing, which is the next thing. And the big thing that I've said here is I've said that anything that wants to use a date range, again, I need to be able to supply it. If somebody's writing some code that's going to say, show me the billing for the past month, I need to be able to say, show me the billing for the exact past period. And so I can control that period. So one, I can control it so I can keep it down to a small enough space that I can tell whether or not the answer is right or wrong. I obviously don't want to test the billing for all of Vendasta for an entire year. I couldn't possibly tell you if the answer is right. But I can tell you if the answer is right for the billing for just yesterday, because I know exactly how many accounts I had yesterday, exactly how many were demo, and those are the kinds of numbers that I can have. So I need to be able, for any time you're testing something with date range, again, just like expiry dates, defaults are great, but for testability, we need to be able to supply beginnings and or ends, I prefer both, of the date range so that we can generate smaller segments for testability and test it on any day of the week. If I can only test billing on the first of the month each month, the test cycle gets really long. Oh, I found a bug. Go fix it. Yeah, I'll test that next month. For some reason, that doesn't go over very well. So date ranges, being able to override the defaults is extremely important. Date formats, we've said this one a bunch of different times in a bunch of different ways. Does everybody know the different date formats? Because there's about 4 competing date formats out there, and some of them look really similar, and they're not. So the standard North American date format, which drives me absolutely bugaboo, is month, day, and year, optional year. This is my least favorite date format. It puts the least significant information in the most significant position, and I can't treat it as a number and just randomly and just sort it. I have to.
Normally say January 1st, 1900.
Just because you said it that way doesn't mean a computer wants to read it that way. So let's segue. My preferred one, of course, is year, month, day. Day.
It doesn't have to be date format. That could be characters or numerics.
Well, let's be honest. Storage type, it is highly unlikely that any programmer is ever going to store what I have written on the screen. Don't get me wrong, I've done a lot of database programming and for engineers, and they store strings that are dates all the time and then ask me to sort it. It's only a mild pet peeve. So of course this is, straight off the last one, this is my favorite. Because the least significant digit is on the left and the most significant digit is on the right. Now, I think pretty much any of us could look at either of these and we'd know right away what date format we're looking at. The problem becomes in the next 2 date formats, month, day, and day, month. Please shoot anybody who uses either of these. January 12th is a brutal date in either of these formats. It is next to impossible to tell the difference between them, and there's a significant difference between them.
On the plus side, June 6th is the same.
So is November 11th. Until June 6th is the same until you ask it to add a week, and then all of a sudden you're 7 months later, and you're in the 13th month of 2014, and your computer blows up. So yeah. Of course, the top one is sort of the North American default standard. The second one is the European default standard.
Aren't there some Canadian places that have 3 months a year?
Canadian
So-
format is a UK format. You choose one.
Yeah.
That's what I'm running.
So both of these, of course. So this bottom one has the optional year on it. The middle one is just the top one without the years on it. That being said, now that we're into the teens, anything that using, ever since 2000, anything that uses only 2 dates for a year is automatically confusing. January 1st, 2001 was 01010101. Like, you couldn't tell just by looking at it, but any of the places meant. So of course, knowing what format is desired is great, so you can format it out correctly. Reading it is the more common place where you run into problems, because users want to type it out in the format that they are comfortable in. And they're not going to tell you what format it hits. So you're going to have to do a certain amount of guessing. This is one of those places where if I run into software that asks for people to type a date in, I automatically mark it as a bug and ask for a date range picker, or at least the option of a date range picker. So sure, the date range picker can put the string in the format that the program's expecting, and that way if somebody doesn't know what format the program is expecting, they can use the date range picker. Oh, they want that format. They can type all. Then they don't have to use the date range picker. They can type the information in, but. Yeah.
Another good thing about web software, anything running a framework, typically you can enforce a configuration of the date format. So the local machine doesn't have any input on what is
010203. It's valid in every one of these formats. And unless you're using a date range picker to allow, or shadow text that says YYMMDD for them to fill in.
When you're getting local time or local time date from a machine, it's web stuff, the framework will take it, and you might have UK, Canadian UK on your local PC, talking about English. That framework is hardwired in to take that format to US.
If you use a compatible format that is using system widgets, yes.
Yeah.
All of those are just going to be display layer stuff. It's actually going to pass it around to epoch. Second since epoch, and millisecond since epoch, depending on the system.
But I've had tons of problems where not having that formatting string configured. Everybody has their, when they set up PCs, they typically set up their names. And they have it, some software that designed in the States expecting it like that. So that's just one issue I've got.
No, I won a testing competition by having my machine set up Canadian and testing American software about 6 years ago. I was able to find all sorts of bugs all over their software. So yeah, displayed format, stored format, we sort of talked about that. Timestamp versus. I typed these all out. You guys could have told me I was being very repetitive. Missing information and like year, we talked about that. Leap year, calendar math. I talked about this one already, and it really all goes up to those sort of top two, which says anytime we're dealing with testing something with dates, we need to be able to override default dates so that we can control things, so that things can be in a knowable state, so that we can have known answers. It's testing for leap years. Well, it's not currently a leap year, but if I'm doing something that needs to be able to handle leap years, I still need to be able to test it, not wait 2 years until everybody's forgotten that we wrote that code and it's wrong. I love the backdating functionality one. We kind of talked about that when we brought it up. Where it's one thing to be able to backdate something, it's another to, for auditability, we need to make sure that dates can be out of order and still make sense. Updated could be before created, if that's where you're storing your contract dates and stuff like that. So, I'm trying to remember what's over on the other side of the screen. Time skew, time zone, reliability of local clock. Yeah, as I kind of inferred at the beginning, and actually reliability of local clock actually explicitly points out that on installed software, because you can change the system clock, it's a lot easier to test some of these things. So with an installed software, I might not have to be able to override the expiry date because I can drive my system clock forward to the expiry date to test that it disables correctly. Now, if I'm working for a really fussy company that wants to be able to detect when that kind of thing has happened, because it's a 30-day trial, and in 30 days they want it to shut down, period. Well, then I have to be able, that's an entirely different testing item where I have to be able to test to see if the system clock has been tampered with.
That's CMOS battery.
Yeah. CMOS batteries just don't need much anymore because most computers use NTP to set their clock unless somebody's messing with them. So yeah, hopefully everybody got lots out of this. We filled out a reasonably full mind map, just sort of talking about some of the issues that we run into when testing, some of the gotcha areas that we have to pay attention to. I don't think any of them are insurmountable, especially if we work with the developers that we're working with or are the developers. And you realize that anything that revolves around time, we need to pay special attention to so that we can make it testable. It's really easy to do software that involves timestamps or times or dates or time zones. That's really hard to test. And this shouldn't be too hard to make it a little bit easier to test, both for yourself and for any people doing testing for you. Thank you very much for coming out to the May gathering of the Saskatoon Testing Discussion Group. Our last gathering of the season will be in June. As usual, I'll take July and August off and we'll restart in September. I don't recall the date of the next meeting off the top of my head. It'll be the second Tuesday, same as always. And it'll be here. I'm hoping to do something a little bit more audience-driven, probably in the range of lightning talks, where everybody in the room would be given 5 minutes to stand up and talk about the hardest testing problem that they've had in the past year. What was the hardest thing that you've had to test? How did you overcome it? Just so that we can get a little bit more sharing going on.
That'll be
June 10th. So, June 10th, come for pizza and lightning talks, and everybody get a chance to tell us what the hardest thing that they've tested in the past year has been. And then we'll restart in September. Thank you very much.